Today we're going to talk about relationships, specifically marriage. What is marriage? The divorce rate has never been higher than it is right now. People seem to be getting married for various reasons. And I'm not sure sometimes we even know why we're getting married. We just often feel it's the next step. So what is marriage supposed to be? It's supposed to be a partnership. A working partnership between two people. People who are supposed to be best friends. People who are supposed to be there to rely on each other when times get tough. To be able to bounce ideas off of each other. To be there to pick up each other's slack when need be. To be there to lift each other when need be. But we are not meant to complete each other. We are not meant to be one-sided in this relationship. I look at society's idea of marriage and where it came from and how it's evolved over the years, and yet I find that a lot of us haven't evolved our own ideas to match the year 2010. I find that a lot of us women still feel that we're supposed to be like we're in the 50s and be housewives. But most of us now also hold jobs. And I find a lot of men, they don't even know what their purpose is supposed to be. They don't need to be the sole breadwinner. It's gotten quite confusing in our society as to what marriage is supposed to be like. Things have gotten busy. We own more things. We often have children to parent. And our marriages they're not surviving these days. When times were simpler, one person would go to work, one person would stay home. The person who stayed home did their absolute best to rear the children and take care of the house. But what we often forget is men often worked long, long hours. And they would go to work before the kids got up and often come home after the children were already in bed. Both people worked very, very hard to make a marriage work, to make that family stable. The one thing that needs to carry through any marriage is respect. And this goes for any relationship, not just marriage. A working relationship starts long before the act of marriage occurs. And a lot of times what we need to understand is our roles need to be discussed before the marriage occurs. Assumption is detrimental to a relationship. And I find a lot of people assume that they're on the same page. We forget as unique people we have different points of view. We have different ideas of where we want to go. And I also find often when we're in a relationship, we put our ideas, our wants, our needs, and our dreams aside. That is valid sometimes. Sometimes you do need to put yourself and your wants and your needs on the back burner, especially if there's kids involved. But when you first get into a relationship, if you stop living your life to live a life with another person, you will breed resentment eventually. You will one day look at the relationship and say, well, this relationship is the reason I didn't do what I wanted to do. And then you will begin to blame the other person, forgetting it was your choice to enter in the relationship. So let's look at that first. Before you get in a relationship, or if you're in a relationship now, you need to remember you have to treat yourself good first. And what does that mean? It means not being selfish, but it means self-serving. If you're pursuing a career or a school, and your relationship may have to be put on the back burner for you to finish what you're doing, this is what partners do. It's funny, with our best friends, we know they will always be there for us. Some friends, we can go years and years in between seeing them, and we still know they will be there for us. But when it comes to relationships, there seems to be a point of view that if I leave the relationship, it's not going to survive. So many people say, long-distance relationships often don't survive. But we forget, in the 50s and the 60s, many people traveled to work, and the other partner would wait, and they would make it work. And remember, people, this was before cell phones, computers, email, Skype. There was no way to contact each other except for the written word. And yet people formed a bond and kept that bond going. But we must be secure in ourselves first. So many stories are told that we look for our other half, our twin flame, our pull apart, as if we are missing half of ourselves and need to find that other half to complete what we are. This is just not true. If we look for another person to make us whole, then we are two halves trying to make a whole. It doesn't make sense. One will always be thinking they need more attention. But when we are a whole person, when we see ourselves as a whole person, when we know we can stand on our own 2 feet, it doesn't mean we will end up alone. It means we will be able to partner another person and allow ourselves to be partnered. You see, when we're insecure, we find it very, very hard to let somebody take care of us, even though that's what we want. The trust factor isn't there. There's a part of us that's going to tell ourselves, well, they might leave one day, And we tend to always find fault in the relationship or test the relationship to see if they'll stay. And unfortunately, what usually ensues next is the power struggle. It seems that in our society today, marriage is permission to treat the other person with disrespect, to try and control the other person's views, outlook on life, their goals and their dreams. And it seems quite odd when you're wanting to be somebody's best friend that you would want to control what they're doing. So we need to ponder how we see relationships for ourselves before we look at where we're going to take it. We need to look at the relationship we have with ourselves. How do we really think of ourselves as a partner? Do we feel like we're just good enough? Or do we feel like we're good enough? When we look in the mirror, do we know that we are so wonderful? Of course we'd make a great partner. And therefore, why wouldn't we attract a wonderful partner? Or do we just jump into a relationship hoping everything will just work itself out? Now, unfortunately, most of us take the latter view. We jump into a relationship just thinking it'll work itself out. So in a lot of ways, we do take marriage too lightly. If you look at the true view of marriage, it is supposed to be forever. But most of us, like I said earlier, don't discuss what we are wanting in our future. Adult conversation is the only thing that needs to be had. Mature adult conversation. Now remember, if we're already not talking to ourselves that way in our own heads, we're going to find it very hard to express what we're doing with confidence. Instead, it will come off as a threat, possibly. I'm going to do this, rather than this is what I'm going to do. fear enters in very quickly, it seems, into relationships, and it's fear that they won't work out. And we start to become self-fulfilling prophecies as we test our relationship, proving to ourselves that it's just not going to work. When we get a best friend, we don't assume the friendship's not going to work out. We'll talk about that more in just a second.